Room
What?
starting to set up.
Well, he here. Hi, Mudge.
Hi.
He waved at you. Oh, there's Ghost Spider. All right, love you, bud.
Everything is fine here on Detention Block AA23, a Star Wars podcast. I'm Mike, joined by Dustin, and we have a new prisoner on today, Luke. So, welcome, Luke, to our podcast and our YouTube channel. We'll get to introductions to him here momentarily, but first to go through the business elements, hit that subscribe button, like this video if you're watching it, comment, subscribe, follow, all the above. We greatly appreciate any little thing that you can do. It really helps get our YouTube channel name and podcast out there amongst all the other Star Wars channels. So any little thing you can do, we greatly appreciate. Our chat is up and running, so come give your thoughts, opinions on the topics we're talking about. And we are going to be focusing around Luke today and his awesome passion for Star Wars. So I will kick it over to Dustin to kind of give us the introduction of Luke and how you know him and everything. And yeah.
Who's Luke? Who is this guy? I don't know this guy. I know this guy over here who's being a naughty bedtime kid. Yeah, so Luke is our new sales engineer, and he started with us, what, 3 months ago now? We just took the training wheels. All right. We need another prisoner in this podcast.
Need a cell.
Yeah, we really actually do need a cell. Is that a thing? Is that good for kids? Put them in a cell? We have kennels. I think we could throw them in the kennel.
Whatever works, you know.
But yeah, so took the training wheels off Luke and kind of learned very early on in the process that Luke was a massive Star Wars fan. I think his collection might rival yours, Mudge. So
Good.
that is
Bring it on.
Something that was exciting just to even talk
Challenge
about
accepted.
that. I feel like I'm in Step Brothers. Who's like, we can be like, hello. No. So I apologize. I got, I'll tell you what, I blame daylight savings or whatever they call it. Where like is it daylight savings or whatever, like the clock moves forward, spring forward or whatever.
Yeah.
This kid is on crack. Right?
It always impacts the kids the most, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I woke up this morning, I was like pretty groggy, but like, is JJ experiencing that?
No, not really. I mean, he's younger, so has less of an impact, I would assume, for him compared to Bennett's age.
I mean, keeps you young or keeps you tired, whichever you prefer.
Both.
But hey, bud, you got to go to
I
bed,
think it gets you
okay?
older. I don't think it keeps you young. It gets you older.
Did you see this? Do you want to show the audience this? This is a Praetorian Guard. Well, it's just kind of like an action figure, I've had it for a while. It was kind of in last episode. Hey, bud. So, help! I apologize. We're kind of, intersecting bedtime with, an earlier start time for us.
Is this at your house? Because I haven't seen this area before. Is this your house?
Yeah, this is upstairs. So
okay. I'm used to your
I came
basement.
up here. So the thought was I'd come up here and do the podcast. Bennett was on his tablet for a little bit. We give him some time before bed to do that. Oh no, we're not going to open it, but we're going to keep it in the package. Maybe later. But since we're doing this a little earlier, it's just the timing of it. So I apologize, but yeah. So Luke and I are coworkers, and he's a big Star Wars fan, and I'll let Luke take it from there. I'm just gonna pause my video for a second. If you hear screaming,
will that be you or the kid?
We'll see.
Oh, did we just lose him? Did he go off, or did we lose him?
I think he just turned the video off.
Yeah, okay. I just paused for a second just so I can
because you completely disappeared, so I wasn't sure if you were completely gone or not.
No, I'm here.
Okay. So yeah, Luke, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what first got you into Star Wars, where the passion originated? Was it from the movies? Because I know you mentioned before that you saw the first movie when you were 5. So give us a little introduction on where you first fell in love with Star Wars.
Yeah, so I was born Luke in the 80s, right? Which is everybody automatically thinks your parents named you after Luke Skywalker.
Did they?
No, actually, my mother says it's Luke from the Bible, but my father has told me that it was Luke from Luke and Laura on General Hospital, which was apparently a really
Okay.
big thing in the
Okay.
early 80s as well. So I'm more inclined to believe my father than my mother, but it is what it is.
But
But
it's
yeah,
convenient. I mean, how nice to have a name like Luke.
right,
I
right.
will ask really quick, did he become your favorite character in Star Wars at the
No,
beginning? Okay. All right.
believe it or not. So actually, that's the kind of the focus of my collection is around my favorite character,
Mm.
and that's R2D2, right?
Oh,
Because
okay.
I believe that R2D2 is the true hero of the Skywalker saga because he was there for everything. He filled in all the missing pieces. He knew the whole story,
For sure.
and I'm kind of a droid junkie in that regard. So, um, but yeah, so I was born in '82, and Star Wars was a big thing. It was in full swing at that point. Everybody was waiting for Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I was super young, but the my mother tells me they brought me to see all 3 of them when they were re-released shortly after Return of the Jedi came out.
Okay.
I don't remember that obviously because I was a little tiny little baby, but in 19, I want to say it had to have been 87 or 88. It was when they did the first 10 years, right? They had that big celebration. They re-released all the movies in the theaters and all that stuff. And my mom brought me to see them, and I fell in love with Empire Strikes Back. Um, I think that was the first movie that I can remember even today. Probably the first movie I saw where the bad guys won. Right, it was kind of a new idea for me at that young age.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, Luke Skywalker. Well, I was a big fan, right? I mean, he was the hero that I grew up with. A perfect age, I think, to fall into it. But I was just talking to my mother-in-law about this the other day. She worked at a hardware store in South Dakota during the whole Star Wars thing. She says every one of those action figures passed through my hands.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? A whole bunch of them passed through my hands too, but I was a kid and I beat the shit out of them, and they fell apart, right? Because that's what kids did. And I look back on that and I'm like, how many? I mean, I just saw not that long ago a Darth Vader with the yellow lightsaber sold for like $9,000.
Yeah.
Ungraded single action figure, right? So you think about that, it kind of
Does it
puts
make her
things.
sick to think how much money probably went through her hands by like
Well, I don't
handling?
know about sick because it would have made me sick if I had, but she's a better person than I am. So, but yeah, so I played with the toys. I had seen the movies. We had them on VHS, so I saw them, as often as I could. But the big one for me was in '91, and the expanded universe. Timothy Zahn
Yeah.
wrote the Heir to the Empire trilogy, and my mother bought me Heir to the Empire because it said Star Wars on it. And she's like, "Well, he likes to read. I'll buy him the book." And very few books that I've read over the years grabbed me as instantly as Heir to the Empire did. And that entire trilogy, and Timothy Zahn to this day is one of my favorite authors, not just Star Wars, just pretty much everything he
In
writes.
general.
But I fell down that expanded universe rabbit hole, right? And having been there at the beginning, I'm kind of jealous of the people who can buy them now because you could go all the way back to Heir to the Empire and start it and not have to wait for anything. But I spent so much time waiting for the next book. And that's kind of where Dustin and I, one of our first conversations, we actually spoke a whole hell of a lot more about Star Wars than we did about business leading up to our business relationship. But one of my biggest gripes about Star Wars in general is the fact that when like Disney bought Star Wars, the first thing they did was pitch the expanded universe. 30 years of stories that everybody loved.
Hey, and they
You
said
know?
they didn't have any content to work with going forward. It's like,
Well, and that's the thing, right? So they cherry picked what they thought were the fan favorites and tried to insert them into their narrative, and it's worked for some people, but it hasn't worked for others. And I mean, we're getting off topic here.
That's what we do.
that's all we do. Tangents
So,
is just what we do.
And at least your off topic is still within Star Wars, because when we get off topic, we talk about like a trillion different things.
yeah. Well, Star Wars is one of my passions. I'm a super duper super nerd, right? So while I was in the Navy, it was hard for me to collect because I was at sea so often, but I'd pull into port with all this money.
He was a seaman.
I was a submariner.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service. Greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I'd never know what to say to that, but
I have to tell a story real quick that dovetails into this.
All right, let's do it.
And it's a little work story, okay? So Luke and I were just in the Dells for a conference down there at the Kalahari Resort, and as is custom when you are on one of these business conferences, you have to take a picture of the booth that you're in and then post it on LinkedIn. And I got a message from my buddy Matt Shire, who through my wedding celebration. Mike, he was down there. He texted me. He's like, you look like a little person next to your colleague. I mean,
well,
and
you
I looked
are
at
a
the
little
picture.
person.
Come on. I'm a littler person.
You are pretty.
But I looked at the picture. Come on, I'm like 5'9". That's average height, guys. I'm 5'9". That's average height. So,
right.
But compared to Luke, I look like he texted me like, Luke looks like your dad.
Well, I'm also 3.5 times wider than you are, so that didn't help either. So,
well, that was funny. I had to get a kick of that, and that kind of dovetails into the fact that you're this giant person in a submarine. Like.
Well, I wasn't this big I wasn't fat when I was in the Navy, bro. Come on, cut me some slack here. I'm gonna have to show you some pictures tomorrow.
I meant maybe taller.
Okay. But yeah, so I had started a collection obviously when I was a kid, right? Got a job at the age of 14 and started spending every penny I earned on Star Wars. I had all of the Power of the Force action figures from both of the late 80s, early 90s lines. And I was the kid that I bought 2 of everything so I could keep one in the box and I could put one on display. Right.
I like the way you think. Investor.
I obviously got into the comics. I was a huge fan of Dark Horse doing Star Wars.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've got the license back is super awesome in my opinion.
I was just going to ask what you thought about that.
Not to take anything from Marvel, okay, but
Dark Horses were better though for Star Wars.
Yeah. And well, all those stories are in the trash can now anyway. But but I had every book that was ever published. I had most of the role playing guides, and I never did the role playing game. But if it had Star Wars on it, I wanted to own it, right? And right before I got out of the Navy, I was like, man, I don't know what to do with all this stuff because I don't want to pack it all up to ship it back to Wisconsin when I get out. So I gave it to my brothers. They lived in New Hampshire, and that's another decision that I regret. I don't know do you guys remember Star Wars: A Customizable Card Game?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you got some there?
Well,
yeah. The second.
This is the second. Yeah, this is the second anthology. But
so I can't even. I was trying to.
I've got a whole binder of them. So
yeah, dude. So I got into it at the very beginning. So I bought the first anthology, and then I went to the store, like to Target, and literally bought boxes of boosters. Mm-hmm. So not just a booster, but and I ended up having like 12,000 freaking cards. It was ridiculous. And I gave all those to my brothers too, because I was like, what the hell am I going to do with these? Well, they're all worth a fortune now. So. But again, I mean, that kind of dovetails into, if you want to talk about me as a collector, you made the comment investment, and that's like 1,000% what my collection is. I'm not one of those people that goes out there and buys to turn a profit, because I think that's shady. And I actually, I came about I don't know, 30 seconds away from being on national news once because I was trying to get a Target exclusive. And I got there right before a peg cleaner got there.
Okay.
He literally walked up and put his arm at the back of the peg, both pegs, and swept them all into his cart. And I'm like, dude, I just want one, because I know you're just going to turn around and sell them for whatever they're on eBay for right now. I just want one. And he's like, nah, dude, nah. These are going for like $64 on eBay. And I was like, I just want one. And I was going to lay him out.
When was this?
This would have been.
Was this sequel trilogy timing or was this?
Yes. No.
Prequels?
Yeah, it would have been probably episode 3. I think I was trying to get like it was Toys R Us. That's what it was, the Lava Vader.
Okay.
Remember the Lava Vader figure?
Yeah.
That was like one per box and everybody was trying to murder each other for. I got a message from one of my friends who worked there and they had broken open like 6 cases.
Oh my gosh.
And so they had 6 of them there and I was there at open and I thought I was the only person that knew there was more than one. But when this guy took them all, dude, oh my God. I was so mad.
That's an act of war, man. That's an act of war.
Well, and then as he's walking away, he's like, I don't even like Star Wars. I'm just trying to make some
money. Come on. Such a dick.
I was like, you know what? It would have hurt a lot less just to say I've never seen Star Wars instead of like Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that was one of the days where I realized that for me, collecting and Star Wars was a passion, more than just a hobby, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a member of several buy-sell groups. I actually run one on eBay, not eBay, on Facebook. And I am a firm believer in no scalping. Now, the people get into the whole, what's the definition of scalping? And I understand that collectibles increase in value and things like that. But the way that I've always done it, the collector's mindset, and I know most people don't agree with me on this, is if I have something that you want really badly, right? And I don't want it really badly, I'll sell it to you. I want to make a little bit, right? But perfect example, I collect hot toys, right? I'm sure Dustin showed you some of the photos of my collection. Yep. If I was at home, we could take a video tour, but I'm in a hotel right now. But
because of me.
Yeah, it's all right, man. It's all right. Well, Hot Toys came out with a Boba Fett animated armor edition, right? So from the Droids cartoon series where he made his premiere, they had a Boba Fett figure that had that color scheme and that fancy weird weapon that he had, and I bought it because I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. Brings back my childhood. And I got it home and I was like, you know what? I don't like this thing at all. So I put it back in the box and I noticed that they were selling for twice retail already on eBay. So I got on one of my 6th scale sites and I was like, hey, is anybody looking for the animated Boba Fett? I've got one. I'll sell it to you for whatever. It was like $15 over retail.
Yeah.
And they were like, everybody thought I was scamming, right? And I'm like, no, dude, I'm not trying to make a profit here. The $15
300 inquiries for it now.
Right? So it irritates me. The vast majority of my Star Wars fan friends are virtual friends. Dustin is the only person I interact with on a regular basis that's as big of a Star Wars fan as I am. Everybody else thinks I'm just a geek.
That's unfortunate that Dustin's the one.
but we're fans in a different way too, because I'm more of a fan like the High Republic, the books, the
video games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the villains, things like that. So, and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? I mean, we're different in our Star Wars fandom, yet the connective tissue is just the Star Wars universe to begin with.
I'll have, I'm assuming, an equal hatred of The Last Jedi, right? So
that's shared amongst all of us.
What frustrates me is it could have
of
been
the whole
so
podcast, I believe, too, like, because there's 3 others that we've had routinely on the podcast, and we all share the same sentiments on that.
Yeah, it was a travesty, but But yeah, so I mean that's kind of my I collect. I actually had a conversation. I've got a really good friend that I met online, Daniel Burtis. We call him the Grand Admiral because he's the biggest Throne fan I've ever met in my life. And
No.
he was texting me today. He's like, "Hey, somebody's got a 000 on the 6 scale group, and they only want $230 for it." And I'm like, "Look, dude, I gotta stop. I'm out of room. I can't do it anymore." And he's like, "What do you mean you're out of room?" I said, "Bro, I've been out of room for two years. Like I've got so much stuff." And my wife says it's not allowed to leave the man cave, right? Because she's not as big of a Star Wars fan as I am. So at this point, I've got all 4 walls covered almost inch by inch with artwork. I've got shelves in my library, like I go in there, and that's what when he asked me if I wanted to be when Dustin asked me if I wanted to be on the podcast, I was like, I hope you guys don't want like a video tour because my room is a disaster right now.
Oh, he didn't mention that is part. No, I'm just kidding.
Because I was
we want to tour the hotel.
Yeah.
I have 27 Trooper 6th scale figures. My wife calls them man Barbies or Marbies for short.
Marbies.
Yeah. And I was sitting in my room the other day, and I think I said something to Dustin. Maybe I was like, I got to stop buying troopers, and the only way I'm going to stop buying troopers is if I get rid of all my troopers. So I was like, a bunch of Star Wars fans. You know anybody who wants to buy all my troopers? But the collection is a combined focus of droids and troopers. So I try to get them all, but I obviously don't have them all. That would be absolutely insane.
How many are there?
Trooper variants?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
18,000.
Well, I'm not that many, but I mean.
Oh, we lost Mudge.
Oh.
I'm the host now.
But he's the one that was streaming, wasn't he?
Yeah, so we might have got kicked off that for a second. He'll come back.
All right.
He can edit, so like when he comes back, even though the stream ended,
okay,
he can edit the live version, like it
tie them together.
Yeah,
because I was wondering, like, how does the recording work? If he's recording, then when he left, it stopped, right? There it is. He's back.
We lost you there, Mudge.
Yeah, I've been having internet issues all day, even for work today, so I'm pushing through this. But we're still going, so.
I dig your watch, man. Is that an Apple Watch face?
Yeah, Apple Watch face. I'll just do it upside down.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. I like that. That's it. I have pretty much every Star Wars watch ever made by Fossil or Citizen. Although I'm getting rid of most of my Citizen watches. I'm a watch junkie too. So that's why my wife gives me so much crap. She's like, if you only had one collection, I'd probably be okay. But you have a shoe collection and a Star Wars collection and a watch collection and a pen collection and a submarine collection, So
you're just a collector in general, then.
Oh yeah,
right?
I like stuff. And I was actually thinking the other day, I wonder if my neighbors think I'm a hoarder because the number of packages we get. But I keep the fact of the matter is, she lets all that other stuff leak anywhere in the house that I want it to. It's the Star Wars stuff that has to stay trapped in the man cave. So there's submarine stuff all over the house.
What does she got against Star Wars? Let's go.
I think it makes her angry because the collection started. So she's my second wife. And my original Star Wars collection, which in my opinion was even more impressive than what I've got right now, actually funded my first divorce. So my master replicas collection, the helmets, blasters, lightsaber hilts, all that stuff, I had to sell that stuff to pay the lawyers. And like at that point, I seriously told myself, I'm never doing this again. I can't do it. And
then here you are.
Well, so what it was.
Hey, Mudge, real quick. Are we still live recording?
Yeah. even when
Okay.
I drop off, because it's through YouTube, so the channel still goes if I drop. So
Oh,
they
well, don't go
they
back
heard
and
us
watch.
talking.
Don't go back and watch.
Yeah. But yeah, it I don't remember exactly what it was that restarted it, but I kind of I think I had some hope that Disney would do the right thing, so at 2014,
sure.
they threw the EU away, which like immediately turned me off, but I was like, I think I can be okay with this. I can make myself okay with it.
Were you nervous though too, like knowing, I mean, like when I first heard about it, I'm like, okay, well, Disney owning it will at least continue the franchise, because obviously it's a cash crop and they're going to do what they can to make as much money as possible. But then at the same time, I'm like, but Disney, I have a feeling the content's not going to be as great.
Yeah, as long as they don't burn it down on the way through, you know what I mean?
Yep.
That's and that's the problem. We get one really epic piece of content for every 3 garbage pieces of content.
Right.
So,
right.
But I mean, but here's the deal, right? So when The Force Awakens came out, obviously opening nights, that my whole jam, that the same thing I did when the special editions came out, same thing I did when the prequels came out, waiting in the parking lot to buy tickets. Although this one, I think I was able to pre-order them because it's way more modern now than it was.
Sure.
But anyway, I went in and watched it and was horrified. And I left very disappointed. And 2 or 3 days later, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it again. I'm gonna go watch it just to make sure that wasn't just the EU hangover. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I went and I watched it again, and I came off feeling a little bit better about it. And I went and I watched it a third time. I watched The Force Awakens 6 times in the theater, so I can't complain about Disney making money. I will tell you that by the time I finished the last in-theater viewing, I had accepted the film.
Yeah.
It's not terrible. It's not fantastic. It's not The Empire Strikes Back, right?
Right.
But
I think there was still potential coming out of it, though. Like, where are we going? And then especially after Rogue One, too, because I loved Rogue One. I'm like, okay, we're building momentum here.
Rogue One was my first, like, I think they can do this moment. Because they so seamlessly brought it together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then and that actually ties into kind of where I was headed. The Rogue One came out, and between The Force Awakens and Rogue One, I realized that Disney was really, really good at one thing, and that is trooper armor, right? Because they came up with all these new, death troopers and shore troopers and transport troopers and assault tank commanders, and and I'm a trooper junkie, troopers and droids, right? So I started buying the figures, and then Disney kept creating more and more and more, and then they brought the stormtrooper variants into reality with the Mandalorian series. So now I've got a squad leader and an incinerator trooper and a heavy artillery, And I sat down one day and I was like, if I don't get rid of them all, it's never gonna be done. I'm never gonna be done, right? Droids was a lot easier because they don't come out with completely new droids all the time, right? So I can keep up with the droid thing. I cannot keep up with the trooper thing.
The trooper thing. To feed off of that a little bit and to play devil's advocate, do you think Disney is good at stormtrooper armor, or do you think they're good at understanding where the money comes?
Oh yeah.
I feel like if they probably had their researchers go back and be like, okay, of the toys and the collectibles from like OT and everything, and from the prequels, what was bringing in all that money? And you have to believe like Stormtroopers OT and then like clone troopers from prequels. It's like, all right, so let's concentrate on these Stormtrooper armor and everything.
I think that's also why they have to have those stupid fucking cute little creatures in every movie that really have no point but just to sell.
Well, you know why
animals.
Know why the porgs were there though, right?
Yeah, so they could.
Well, it wasn't it the pigeons or whatever that were there, or the puffins.
The puffins, the puffin.
They just turned them into something Star Warsy. So that was being resourceful. But you got to admit, at least me,
until I found out about the puffins, I thought it was a gratuitous money grab.
Yeah. Well, the crystal coyotes or crystal
Maybe
wolves were
they
definitely money grab.
maybe they migrated the puffins there, and we're like, this will give us a perfect. This will give us the perfect cover for our insidious plan.
Well, and I heard this, and I don't know if it's necessarily true, but it wouldn't surprise me. Like when I was talking about the crystal dogs or crystal wolves or whatever, one of the things that they were talking about was like, how can they expand the audience with the sequel trilogy? How can they bring in more of a female following as well? And they were like, all right, what are things that women like? Diamonds and puppies. So let's just combine them together. That could be a total rumor, but I wouldn't surprise me.
That sounds very Disney, bro.
Yeah, right.
Super Disney,
right?
But yeah, I don't know that they're like I said, Mandalorian was great.
Yeah, first 2 seasons.
Book of Boba Fett, you know, and it was Mandalorian season 2.5 is what
they lost me at Vespas.
Oh, dude, that was so terrible. The low speed Vespa chase.
Yeah,
the slow pace chase. Yeah.
Do you remember the meme is from Seinfeld where they're in the carts and the old people are chasing them? That was what was used a lot during that. It was so gratuitously bad.
It was terrible. Well, I mean, look at Grogu as a whole, right? That it didn't have to be a tiny little baby Yoda. It could have been anything, but that was a money grab because they knew kids would want a baby Yoda, right? But you know, so Mando, and you're right. Season 1 and 2, Mando, great. Ahsoka, season 1, fantastic.
The end kind of trailed off a little bit. Kind of losing me at the end, but the first, 90% of it was great.
It was super epic for me to see Thrawn on screen.
Oh yeah,
live.
Oh yeah.
Even though
and Hayden Christensen as Anakin and Darth Vader, that was amazing. In the world between worlds, and young Ahsoka with Hayden,
and that all brings it to like Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? And I know Dustin, I think was you, Dustin, that was making fun of me for liking Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't remember who it was.
Yeah, it was me. Because my favorite part of all of Star Wars is them hiding Leia in a trench coat, like it was some like Three Stooges theme.
All I think of is Andy Dufresne, who notices what kind of shoes you're wearing. She was short, maybe they wouldn't look down. Plus, they're in an alien city, It seems weird to focus on one thing, Dustin, especially when the greatest Darth Vader sequence ever put to film is in the last episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
Right? Because
you didn't kill me.
Yes. Oh my God. How many times have
I did
just that battle? You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did. And then the voice like kind of alternating back and forth.
Well, and the lighting, because they went from red or blue to red in that conversation.
So great.
Yeah.
But then like all the kid stuff sucks, right? At least I think it does. And I usually like kid stuff, right? Like I'm an Amazing World of Gumball fan, right?
Oh yeah, that's a great one. I work from home, so that's like one of the things that I have like at to the side, mindless watching of Gumball. Nothing else is on at that time of the day.
I might have to let you guys nerdgasm with each other because it sounds like Raina's waking up, and so we got to play main coverage here, if that's all right.
Yeah. Well, are you going to come back on, or?
I'll try. I mean, maybe I can just pause my video and everything, but
yeah, you can pause it. Just come right back when you can.
So, right, real life calls or screams in this case.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. You were talking about Book of Boba Fett, though. I actually really enjoyed how that show was starting. The whole like culture behind the Tusken Raiders and everything.
Oh, yeah, that was awesome.
I wish they would have just like kept with that kind of storyline and left it there. How it turned into, Mando 2.5 and then everything else with that. Like I wasn't as impressed, but I was really enjoying the Tusken Raider stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you got to see kind of it kind of emphasized some of the things about Boba Fett that you didn't think about, right? Like
Right.
the emotional ties he formed with those people and the way the relationships in the tribe worked.
Yeah.
And it was really good at the beginning. And then when he went into the whole crime lord mode, that's kind of what ruined it, right?
Yeah.
Like if he'd been like instead of a bounty hunter, he'd be like a mercenary, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but then it would have literally been it would have been Mandalorian 2.5. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Right.
I kind of could see where they were going with that, but
Do you think that was kind of their plan? I mean, probably just because how long it takes to, produce a show and everything. But do you think that was always their plan to have it kind of feed into a Mando season 2.5 in a way to bring like all these characters together, or did something change along the road?
I think they did have it planned. I think they kind of needed to intertwine the Boba Fett and Mandalorian storyline because of the way the Mandalorian was working so hard with Bo-Katan to bring all the Mandalorians back together, right?
Right.
Even though, Bo-Katan told Boba Fett, you're no Mandalorian because he was a clone, right? But that's when you get into that's when I start getting all angsty about the expanded universe, though, right? Because the whole Mandalore thing in the expanded universe was way cleaner.
Oh yeah.
Than this dark saber nonsense.
Yeah.
And we knew what Boba Fett's role was, and his character was kind of defined by not wanting to assume that role. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was. I think it was good. Again, I try to give everything that has the word Star Wars on it a fair shake.
Yeah.
And there's some things that I can get over, but there are others that I can't. I'll tell you right now, I think with the turmoil that surrounded the production of Solo, Disney ended up on the right side of that equation by bringing Ron Howard in because Solo was a fantastic film.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think its biggest suffering and the reason we're not going to get a sequel is because they released it on Memorial Day. They didn't advertise it well, and everybody was still pissed off about The Last Jedi.
I was just going to say Last Jedi right? played a major role in that.
There were so many people that were like, I'm done with Star Wars. I'm done. This was terrible.
They were practically boycotting it at that point.
Well, dude, there was a change.org petition that got like, I don't even remember how many signatures to remove it from canon and redo it, right?
Yeah.
Have a completely new episode 8. Like, they're never going to do that. Disney, they spent so much freaking money making those movies. And, well, I don't know how much you read the background stuff, but when Rian Johnson was asked about Kylo Ren, right? Because the first thing you notice, or maybe first thing the super nerds notice, and you're one of them, but is that Kylo Ren's scar moved, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And somebody asked Rian Johnson that in an interview, and his answer was, I just didn't really like where they had put it. I'm like, bro, you can't pick up in the middle of a series and change something like that because people
we'll notice it. We'll notice it.
Yeah. And to me, it seemed like he just didn't care. Like he had this agenda of something that he wanted to produce that was more of a James Bond movie with a lightsaber fight in it than anything else.
Yeah.
I will say that the one partially redeeming characteristic of that movie is the hyperspace missile scene. Where she takes out the Supreme Leader's dread ship, dude. Oh, that was so awesome to see that on the big screen.
That was really cool.
So the effects, some of the effects were cool.
I really like Last Jedi. If it didn't have the Star Wars, tag on it, and it was just its own movie, like, feel like it'd be a great movie.
Sure.
Visually, storyline, like everything. What ruins it is it just does not really continue the Star Wars story that George Lucas set forth.
Well,
and
it did Luke Skywalker dirty.
Very much so.
So
Well, and there were also many things that really didn't make sense. Like
Yeah.
the thing that always stands out in my mind about that movie, and I feel like it just represents the whole thing, was that scene where Finn is like going to sacrifice himself, and and he's driving that speeder, and then all of a sudden Rose comes in and like takes him out, um, and then he like goes up to her and he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like talking about how to win the war, like it's not about like killing or destroying the things we hate, but preserving the things we love. And then
Yeah.
as soon as she says that, the next shot is like that big laser just shooting into that wall and being like, well, there's all the people I love, and you're destroying the people I love. Like, it just does not make sense. Like, what you just did was what I was just doing, and now you
Right.
just made it worse. So it's
Yeah.
like, and she almost killed herself in crashing him. It's like,
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense at all. And it's nothing to the actors or actresses or anything. It's just how the story was written. It just,
Oh yeah, you can't get down. That's like all the people that got down on Jake Lloyd. I'm like, you realize that it wasn't Jake Lloyd; it was the shitty script.
Right. Yeah, I don't think George Lucas is good at writing script for kids, because
No,
I
he's
feel like
not.
no kids have ever done well in George Lucas's Star Wars movies.
And he's not real good at love
Yeah.
scenes either, because the episode 2 scenes and the episode 3 scenes
Oh,
between
we're
Padme and
cringe.
Anakin were always super awkward. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like he
Yep.
writes action, right? That's
Yep.
George's thing.
He's a visionary. He's not necessarily
Right.
like a writer. So
It's like, George, tell somebody your ideas and they will turn it into a story.
right. Tell Filoni, tell Favreau, and then let them do it.
Speaking of Filoni and Favreau, those are the two. So Kathleen Kennedy is finally going to be out, right?
Yeah. Well,
That's
she'll probably be around for a while, like consulting, and she wants to finish her films.
but she won't be in charge.
Right. I'm assuming you saw the back and forth between her or Puck's release of her like quitting or whatever, and then her interview with Deadline saying, "I'm not retiring," which is funny because like Puck never said that she was retiring, and just that she was stepping down. But yeah, so I'm happy to hear that. I have to believe that by the end of 2025, she probably will be stepping down and someone else coming in. So you're saying that Favreau and Filoni would be what you would want?
Dave up top.
Dave Filoni at top.
Oh yeah. Give him Lucasfilm, because he is, and not to take anything away from Jon Favreau, great guy, great director, great producer. He made fantastic content, but Dave Filoni is the fan's fan.
Right.
And a fan's fan needs to be in charge of Lucasfilm. Kathleen Kennedy was not. I don't even think Kathleen Kennedy liked Star Wars, to be honest with you. I think she was an Indiana Jones fan. Seriously, I think she put all of her efforts into making sure they could get 2 more Indiana Jones movies out of Harrison Ford.
Probably it could be.
And good for them, but she's diluted Star Wars to a dangerous point. All in what they say is an effort to bring in a new generation of fans, right? But guess what? A movie made in 1977 is still bringing in new fans. So I think that shows you that the formula is what it needs to be, that you probably shouldn't tamper with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's no reason to turn Star Wars into a social justice platform either. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and that's they just, and I feel like it's not just Star Wars, it's just movies in general.
No, it's everything.
Really moved away from like the storytelling aspect. And they've put kind of, they have a message that they want to put first, and then the story to kind of fit the message.
Yeah.
And it should totally be the other way around. It should be the storytelling first, and let, any kind of message or purpose develop organically. And it's just, I don't know if it's people just aren't as creative these days.
I think I just lost you. Am I out here by myself now? Mudge locked up, and Dustin is handling family matters. And think I'm streaming by myself.
I'm back.
There you go. I was
Sorry. Yeah, this my guess right now is because my wife is probably watching her shows and using even more of the bandwidth, and my bandwidth has been terrible today all day.
yeah.
But no, what I was just saying before is that I feel like it's just all movies in general where, you know, the creative writing has kind of disappeared. I don't know if it's because everyone's putting the agenda or the messaging first, or if creativity um, and original thought has just gone on the decline as well, but maybe a mix of both. I don't know. I just really want to get back to the old time storytelling because all older movies now are way better than anything now. Everything now is just either a remake or a sequel or a continuation.
Yep.
Nothing original. So
Well, and the biggest problem is, and I think you're right. I think it's a combination of both lack of creativity, and trying to get a message across. But I think both of those kind of tie together to create like a fear of, well, what if I do this and it doesn't work? We have this formula that works. Let's just make another version of that formula, right? A sequel or a remake, like Disney with all these live action remakes. Nobody needs a live action Lion King, right? Nobody needed a live action 101 Dalmatians. We want new stories, and I think that's another problem with Star Wars is the sequel trilogy wasn't new stories,
right?
You know, it was the same story, with different imagery,
especially The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And I think people gave that one a pass because they were like, okay, maybe this is the intention. They want us to believe it's going a certain way, and then it's going to go a completely different direction. You brought up Lion King, and I was going to ask you, what do you think? Which movie is watched more today, the cartoon or the live action?
The cartoon, 100%.
Exactly. So it's like, what's the intention of doing these when the originals are still the ones that are garnering all the interest and viewership? Because I have to believe, money, something else for them to watch and other merchandise. And I don't know. So you're a big expanded universe fan. You're a big Thrawn fan and Timothy Zahn books. Have you read the other two trilogies that he's written since the original one? And
I was actually super excited when they let Tim bring Thrawn back into canon, right? And then because then they did that. Getting to see the Chiss side of things is super cool for me, right? Because we knew so little, even in the expanded universe, we knew so little of the Chiss. And pretty much everything that we learned about them was through the Fell family. So we didn't know what was tainted by them, or so getting to see how the CEDF work, Chiss Expansionary Defense Force, the ranking structure, and the Chiss families, super cool. And I think both of those trilogies are tributes to how big of a nerd Timothy Zahn is, right? Because you could not possibly have achieved what he did in those three trilogies, if I include the original, actually technically four, because if you include the Heir to the Empire and then the Hand of Thrawn series, and then the two new trilogies, he had to have had all of that fleshed out almost the whole time. You know what I mean? So he had this, he had this
kind of like George Lucas had the whole vision of everything.
And when you give somebody like that the ability to put it on paper, it's one of the greatest gifts you can give to the world, right? And
do you think he could do you think he could write for movies or film? A little bit of a difference. So
I think it would be dumbing it down too much for him.
Yeah, that's true. There is much more of a sophistication for.
I think he might work as like a screenplay consultant, maybe. You know what I mean?
Consultant.
But I think he's more of a big picture guy. So I think he could be one of those, like, give me an idea for a movie. then they would be like, oh, we got to turn this into like 5 movies by the time they get the idea. You know what I mean?
And that's good. Like,
Yeah.
that's something Disney would want because that would garner interest for multiple different films. Or
it's the same thing with Kevin J. Anderson, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
Tim Zahn and Kevin J. Anderson were the 2 earliest. And I think Kevin is great. He's written a lot of really good stuff. And I think that his books would have made the Jedi Academy trilogy would have made a fantastic trilogy as well. Right. That was my biggest gripe. With them pitching the EU is like, dude, I literally just spent the last 33 years reading every book and comic that was released. And it was 33 years worth of life, So I wanted to see the Yuzong Vong on.
Oh yeah,
that's
so many people did. So many people did.
Right.
And I mean, that had to be one of the worst decisions that they've made.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned earlier, they doubled down and was like, oh, we don't have content to base these stories off of. It's like you have endless amount of content if you just would give up your pride and being like, we just want to stick to the stories we want to tell. Well, if you really want to make money, if you really want to grow the Star Wars franchise and tag, like, bring the people what they want. It's like, how much of a softball do you have with all that content from the EU and then be where you are today based off of decisions. So
they literally had some of those. There are a lot of trilogies, right, in the Star Wars universe. So some of those trilogies were a guaranteed 3 best-selling, box office topping movies, right? And because they even could have gotten the originals involved in the Yuzon Vong War. Because they are 30 years older than they were in Return of the Jedi, which is how old they were during the Yuzon Vong War. There's so much stuff. And that's, I think the biggest gripe is the cherry picking, right? So now they threw it all away, and now they're just like, oh, we'll bring this guy back, and we'll bring this guy back, and then we'll just bring this random thing in like cortosis, or you know what I mean? They're just gonna throw that in there. And I guess I don't really know what their plan is, and I don't know that they know what their plan.
I was just going to say, I don't think they really thought this through, and I think that was representative of the sequel trilogy having multiple different, directors and wanting the stories going to different direction for each movie.
Yeah.
So
I think the biggest problem they have right now is they've fanned the flames of this toxic fan thing, right?
Yeah.
So anybody who says anything
if you don't like it, you're
toxic fan.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, it's okay to like something or to not like something because it sucks. It doesn't have to be because it had characters that didn't conform to your beliefs and things like that. You can make up whatever you want. And I'm sure there were some people that were like, oh, this is horrible because it had whatever in it.
There definitely is toxic, or there are toxic fans out there, but it's just a smaller minority of the frustrated fans.
If your story is hot garbage, it doesn't matter, and none of the other details matter, right?
Exactly.
So that's like what Dustin and I were talking about, because Dustin, and you even mentioned it this evening, you like the High Republic, right? And when they announced the High Republic, I got super psyched, right? Because I was like, hell yeah. Because in my opinion, when somebody says the High Republic, I think like 4,000 years ago, right? And they're like, no, this is like 400 years ago. We're like, that wasn't the High Republic. Like, not in my brain, it wasn't. You know what I mean?
I still like what they've done with it.
No, see, then that's what I was going to say. So at first I was like, and then I read the first 3 books, and I was like, you know what, this is actually a really good story. There's some stuff in there that I don't like, but that's pretty much with everything Disney has released has something I don't like, right? And that's why I worry if I say too much that I'm going to be that toxic fan.
No, well, not that.
I can't think of a single movie or TV show I've ever watched where there wasn't something that I didn't like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So does that make me toxic of everything?
Well,
No.
even the OT movies. I mean, there's many things
Yeah.
that we nitpick about, like why are you flying snow speeders straight into the AT-ATs where the Gens are
Right.
facing forward? Why are
It's-
you bringing your fleet right in front of the primary weapon of the Death Star? Like,
Yeah.
there's things we will nitpick about it because we're passionate fans. But the OT movies, their stories are great, and that's what makes it a great movie or a great
Yep.
trilogy.
Yep. And that's my favorite idiosyncrasy in Star Wars is, and it's right there in episode 4, right? First movie you ever see, nobody's as accurate as this except Imperial Stormtroopers, and then they never hit anything in any movie ever again, right? So Obi-Wan's talking about how accurate they are in that surgical strike against the Jawas, and then we never see them shoot anyone ever again. So it's just, but you're right, the stories, and getting back into my expanded universe gripe here, the stories were there and they didn't use them, and that is the biggest travesty I think that was ever done to any franchise. I'll get over it eventually, like when I die. But
I cut out for a second, but I can guess what you just said. That they didn't bring Han, Luke, and Leia together in one scene. Is that where you were going?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was saying that
You failed, Muck.
Damn it! I thought for sure I had that.
All the stuff they threw away, I think, is one of the biggest travesties. That and the fact that Hayden Christensen got into Return of the Jedi. That's a bad one too.
Yeah. How do you feel about Luke, Leia, and Han never being together in one scene in all the sequel trilogy?
I don't know if they were ever all together on the same set, right? I mean, because Harrison Ford only came back under the rule essentially was, I'll come back if you kill me, right? That's the rumor.
Yep.
For the life of me, I can't figure out why
he wanted to be killed off in the OT, but they weren't.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, for the life of me, why does he hate Star Wars so much? Right? Yeah. It's what made him who he is. Some people say Indiana Jones, but do you think he'd have gotten into Indiana Jones without Star Wars? No,
probably
right?
not.
I would say Harrison Ford is America's grumpiest man.
I think to a certain extent, yes. But if you look at his interviews about the Dial of Destiny, he's like, oh, all these people think the movie is so terrible, but I think it's the best one I ever made because I had so much fun doing it, and I'm glad I got to get one more done before we retire the character. And I'm like, that's cool. I mean, that's cool. When you go out and you start talking about how much you hate Star Wars, that pisses me off. I mean, it doesn't piss me off. It irritates me because I'm like, you hear all the time like, oh, well, they were going to cast such and such for this role, and you can't fathom anybody else playing that role. That's how you feel about Han Solo and Harrison Ford, right? Star Wars isn't James Bond, where every 4 movies you can change the actor and everybody's just like whatever,
right?
But I don't know that all 3 of them were ever on set together, because the Luke and Leia had a scene together, and Han and Leia had a couple scenes together, but then Luke died, right? God.
Yeah. Well, and technically Luke and Leia weren't together.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I mean, but
it was a forced whatever
from the real world side of it, that we knew that they were on set together for that. But yeah, it would have been cool. It really would have. But I think literally once Harrison Ford's character got killed off, he was like, fuck it, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
So,
well, I feel like I can almost guarantee that somewhere in either the Mandalorian and Grogu or one of the movies that they're going to come out with, they're going to have like a scene where it's Luke, Leia, and Han. I mean, it's probably going to be like deep fake or something like that, but just a way to like, Disney's grabbing that low-hanging fruit and everything.
Right.
It's going to be a way that they're going to make it. I mean, look at Luke when he appeared at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian. Like, how big of an impact was that?
That was so awesome.
They're going to do something like that and maybe bring in, the original 3, but just like deep fake or something like that.
Yeah, I remember watching that episode And I was with
Did
my
you
wife.
cry? Did you
My
cry?
wife, I did not. My son did.
Did he?
My wife, my son, and I were sitting on the couch, and I heard a noise and I'm like, oh my God, that's an X-Wing. Oh my God,
Yeah.
an X-Wing. That's Luke Skywalker. Oh my God. Right. And my wife was like, what are you talking about? And as soon as the X-Wing flew in, and I was like, yes, this is so cool. And then just to watch him obliterate those dark troopers.
That's the
But
Luke Skywalker we know and
yes,
love. Like, how did you go from that? Well, I guess the Last Jedi came out first, right? So
yeah,
then
but
they went from that to that.
But that's the Filoni Favreau touch right
Yeah.
there, right? Because if they had been if Dave Filoni had been the creative director at the time that Last Jedi was made, because I think it was like he got put in the creative director position like right after Rise of Skywalker, right? I think. I don't remember. But Luke Skywalker is not a hider. He's not a run and hider, right? And I think that was the biggest mistake Disney did with The Last Jedi is, oh, Luke made a mistake and he ran away and hid and like made it so that nobody could find it.
I
Like,
mean, you
that's
talk
not,
about the like starting off the movie on like just the worst footing ever is when he like literally first scene he throws the
yeah,
lightsaber away.
yeah,
It's like the most uncharacteristic thing for him
yeah.
to do.
Well, I mean, think about everything he went through from A New Hope till where he was, restarted the Jedi Academy, redeemed and killed his father, right? Trained his sister.
Well, he didn't really kill his father, did he? His father kind of killed himself by saving Luke.
Yeah, yes, you're right. But he did take
Like
his
he did,
mask off.
he didn't like take the lightsaber and jab it through his
No,
heart.
no, he didn't. No. But I mean, he fought his father, and his father
He confronted him, which is what Yoda said he had to do.
Yep.
I guess
Yep.
he technically killed his father by being a moron and challenging, the emperor,
Yeah, but he had to do it. He had to, right? It's all part of the story. Good has to defeat evil. It has to, right? That's what makes The Empire Strikes Back so appealing.
Or it could be like Spaceballs. No, good is dumb. Evil will always win.
Right. But when the good guys don't win, it makes a much more attractive movie, right? But in the end, the good guy has to win. Otherwise, it doesn't become. It's not as rewarding of a movie to watch, right? And everybody wants to show their kids movies where the good guys win because.
Well, and that was like the premise of, one of the premises of George Lucas creating this story. It's about good versus evil. It's about family. And that's where like things have gotten a little bit gray as of recent. So, like you think of like the Acolyte and everything, where the bad guys aren't necessarily bad. They're like good and everything.
Yeah.
And that's where everything starts to get a little muddy and starts moving away from Star Wars.
Yeah.
And even said, they're looking to move away from George Lucas. And it's like, how do you do that? Especially when they were making the deal and they said, we promise we will honor your characters, we will honor the legacy, and then they don't abide by that.
Yeah It's, I don't know, man. It there's so much bad and so much good that's now. I'm happy that the franchise is still alive, right?
Oh yeah.
So I'm always going to be a Star Wars fan, no matter. Everything they make could be garbage from this point forward.
I'll still watch it. I'll still watch it.
I got 43 years worth of stuff in my brain, and I got my library and my comic books and my video games. I will, even if I don't watch any of the new stuff, which I seriously doubt will ever happen. I'll always give it a shot.
At least give it a shot.
Star Wars will always be part of my life, right? And that's I geek out because both of my boys are Star Wars fans as well, and my wife thought I was poisoning their minds. I'm like, I did not force it on them, right? They saw my collection and they asked questions, and then when they wanted toys, they started asking for Star Wars toys. I didn't force anything on them,
right?
And I think, generally speaking, Star Wars attracts anybody who has even a slight nerd bent. Loves Star Wars, right? I still run into people that are like, oh, I haven't even seen it before. Dustin and I have a coworker that we were talking to on Monday who's never seen it.
Oh, I love
Anyone,
talking to those
anyone,
people and trying to get them to watch,
right?
and then get their reactions.
Yeah, but that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. They talk about, because even George did it with the prequel trilogy, Jar Jar, right? He said Jar Jar was a comedic element that was added to bring new generation of kids in.
Yep.
And they tried it, what they did with the Porgs, they did it with Grogu, they did it with all the stuff in the sequel trilogy. But the fact of the matter is, you could show somebody A New Hope from 1977, and they're going to be a fan whether they're 8 years old or 80 years old, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't need to change anything. They just thought they could fix the least broken franchise in the history of the world, right? I mean, you can talk Star Trek all you want, but Star Wars is, I think, the biggest, strongest franchise ever created by man, right? Everybody, even if you've never seen anything Star Wars, if you hear the Star Wars music, everybody knows where it's from.
Well, and I think what's a big kicker for Star Wars is many times big franchises even start off as books, and then they've just been, adapted to the big screen. But Star Wars had no books. Movies were the original content source, and everything has developed from those original 3 movies. And I think that's awesome. And I think Star Wars has always been and will always be an element of escape for people, for fans, to get away from the real world and get away from life and just go on a ride, in a sense. And I think the more real they make it, the less appealing it becomes, because it takes away from that escape element. And that's what we're missing.
Exactly. You're exactly right, dude. That is why we don't need it to be a social justice platform, because it's an escape from reality. It's science fiction.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't need to be. As a matter of fact, the less real it can be, the better.
The better.
Right? That's why people are like, well, Star Trek is better because they obeyed the laws of physics. I didn't want to have to think about physics. I'm watching science fiction.
Yeah.
I want lasers and lightsabers and vacuum of space,
It sets the tone from the opening scroll, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I mean, how much more distant from real life can you set than those words? So I think of when I was a younger kid, and I vividly remember just floating on the back in my parents' pool, looking up to the sky, pretending to be Luke Skywalker, like flying an X-Wing pilot.
Hell yeah.
And it's like, I want it to be that again. I want to be able to put myself in the shoes of Luke Skywalker, put myself in the shoes of a Jedi or someone, and enjoy the stories that way. So
I think another thing too, just to point, like, who's going to watch Star Wars and then like take up the social justice crucible, like, is it
right?
So what I'm trying to say is
Star Wars changed my mind about so many things.
So that's what I'm saying is like, okay, I mean, I understand the thought behind it, but is it even effective? And if it's not, then why even try?
Well, they're trying to be inclusive. They're appeasing the sections of the audience that, whatever. It doesn't need to happen. That's the thing about Star Wars is there was love, but there was never love, right? You know what I mean? We had, in the trilogy, we had 3 kissing scenes total in the trilogy, right?
Yep.
That's totally fine. We knew Leia and Han were in love. We didn't need
one was kind of a sketch kiss. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. We want to encourage one of those,
but we don't. We knew they were in love. We didn't need to see that they were in love, right?
Yep.
Just like the one thing in the sequels they did, Ben. We can argue about his name later. Ben is their kid. We didn't need to see him growing up. We didn't need to see their family life. It wasn't the Brady Bunch, right? We knew they got married, they had a kid, the kid grew up, he went crazy. That's enough for Star Wars. We don't need to know who's dating who and why they're dating and what they do in their off time, right? We want to see.
You don't want to know the pronouns of Basil?
No, we just want to see people shooting at each other and fighting each other with lightsabers and traveling through hyperspace. That's all we want.
Yeah.
More of those hyperspace whales. That's what I want. More hyperspace whales.
Space whales, man.
Yep.
Those are freaking awesome. Purgle. And they make for a great transport too, I guess. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. My
While you're
son was
shipping them
hoping
out and
my son was hoping they'd make a big plush of it that had an open mouth with a little plush starship in it.
Not a bad idea.
right there.
That'd make money.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But I mean, you talk about money, Dustin. Everything that says Star Wars on it makes money, whether it's garbage or not. That's what Disney's banking on. Like, there are literally people out there that are still buying Star Wars Kleenex boxes. Like I'm a collector, but I don't have to have everything. Right? I don't need that collection of Chiquita Banana Star Wars stickers from 2015.
Why not? Why not?
because
you're toxic. You're hating it. Stop.
I'm out of room, bro. I don't have room for banana stickers.
So what is next? Is there next for like collecting, or is there like a focus that you want to keep to?
Well, I recently, and I say recently, Dustin laughed at me about this. I went to Disney World for May the 4th this year. It was actually my oldest son's
You mean last year?
That was last year, yeah. May the 4th, it was my son's Make-A-Wish trip, which the circumstances sucked that we got there, but he's good to go now. And Disney on a Make-A-Wish is like the greatest experience in the world, because you get literal front of the line everything privileges, and they treated him like a king for 4 days. I fell in love with Legacy lightsaber hilts, right?
Okay.
So I bought one at Disney World on May 5th. The dark saber.
Okay.
That's the best.
Then I got home and I set it up in my man cave, and I thought, boy, this lightsaber looks lonely. I'll buy another one. All right. So remember, this is May 4th, 2024. I bought my first lightsaber that week. It is now March, 12th, 2025, and I own 27 lightsabers. So
I'm so proud. That's music to my ears.
I sent Dustin a picture of my collection because I was trying to remember what I had. I had them all laid out on my couch down in the man cave. I was like, holy shit, I have 27 lightsabers, and I bought them all in less than a year. And there's still more that I want. So it's
Hey, speaking of Disney, I heard this on a podcast today that there's like people in wheelchairs that will hire their services out for you to get at the front of the line. Like they'll charge like $130 an hour, but it's still way cheaper than buying the fast pass.
So right after I was down there, Disney changed their handicap rules, because it was when we were down there, like literally anybody could rent a scooter or a wheelchair, and you got not always directly to the front of the line, but much closer to the front of the line. And people were renting scooters just for that. So there were people coming that needed them that couldn't get them because they were rented out to people who didn't need them and were using them to cheat the line. So now you have to prove like medical necessity or something to rent one. And depending on what the medical necessity is, and I don't know what the legality of this is, but depending on what the medical necessity is, determines whether you get to the front of the line handicap access, or whether you have to park your wheelchair or scooter and wait in the regular line with people. So I don't know how they're going to manage that, because like asking people about their medical conditions, I think, is illegal.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. It's Disney. It's not my responsibility. It's
do you have a favorite item of your collection, or of most valued, whether valuable or invaluable, and then most valued of value?
So I will say my most valued item, not the most valuable. The most valued item I own is a Star Wars annual #1 blank variant that has a custom drawn Sith trooper on it.
Okay.
by he was not a Marvel artist. He was a Topps artist, a Star Wars Topps artist. Drew it for me. I became good friends with him on Facebook. So that's probably my personal favorite, emotionally valuable to me
Sure.
item. My most valuable price wise. So I think I'll preface this by saying I kind of alluded to it earlier. I don't buy things for resale value. I buy them because I love them. So I don't have a lot of like super high value items. But I have a piece of artwork by Steve Thomas. Steve Thomas is he's done a lot of stuff for Acme archives, but he does a lot of vintage style travel posters and things like that.
Sure.
And he got kind of enlisted by Lucasfilm to do some Star Wars items. So he did one for like the Kessel Run and the Hoth Wampa Trail and some cool things like that. Visit Yavin 4, Forest Moon, and it was during a period of time where I was kind of experimenting with social media and famous people. And I would just randomly message famous people, artists, authors, things like that, and see if they responded to me. And I messaged Steve Thomas and I said, "Hey, Steve, I love your artwork. I've got several pieces, but I'm also a member of a group on Facebook called Astromex Anonymous, and it's a huge group, and they love droids, right? And I'm an R2D2 fan. I told him my whole deal. I said, what would be really cool is if you made one of your advertising style posters for like Astromex." And like 3 days later, I get a response back, "Hey, Luke, it's a really great idea. I'll think about it. Steve." And I was like, "Is this really Steve Thomas?" He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Holy shit." But anyway, like 6 months later, I'm cruising the Acme Archives website. And I do this quite frequently to the irritation of my wife. I still sell avidly for Star Wars stuff. But so I'm scrolling through the Acme Archives site and I see a link for a new Steve Thomas artwork. And I click the link and I'm like, that motherfucker. It was an R series advertisement poster. And I was like, son of a bitch.
You're like, I get royalties off this, right?
So I ordered it, right? I bought it. It was $89. And it shows up and I got a frame for it and I hung it on the wall. And every time I looked at it, I was like, "Steve, you son of a bitch." And then not 4 or 5 days after I framed it, I get a poster tube in the mail from Steve Thomas. And inside is artist's proof number 3 of 15, hand signed, hand numbered, with a note from Steve saying, "Hey, Luke, thanks for the idea." So I was like, you know what? I don't know what it's worth, but in my opinion, that is the most valuable item in my collection.
Oh yeah.
And I've become, I wouldn't say close friends, but I've chatted with J.W. Rensler. I don't know if he did like the making of Star Wars books.
Okay.
So I was chit-chatting with him. I've had some discourse with Timothy Zahn, which
okay,
was
that's pretty
like,
cool.
He actually talks to people. Actually, I mentioned earlier that my friend Daniel, that we call him the Grand Admiral because he's such a huge Thrawn fan.
Yeah.
And, when the first Thrawn trilogy came out, they, how they always did like convention exclusive copies of books, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Del Rey did a convention exclusive for Star Wars Celebration of the new Thrawn book, and they totally underestimated the demand, right? So Star Wars Celebration is 4 days long. They expected they had enough books to hand out X number every day for 4 days, but they ran out on the first day. And
Whoops.
I had just kind of interacted with Daniel in the past. We weren't really friends or anything like that, but I had managed to get somebody to secure a copy of this book for me at the convention. So I was going to pay cover price $50 plus shipping to get it to me. And they were selling on eBay for $450, $460. And this guy in my Star Wars buy sell group is like, I need to have this book. And I'm like, this dude is going to spend $400 on a book. That's insane. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I came up with this brilliant idea. So I had this copy that I acquired for list price. And I messaged Tim Zahn out of the blue. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this. This is going to be awesome. So I messaged Tim and I'm like, hi, Tim. I don't know if you read these, but if your assistant or whoever reads these if I send you a book, will you autograph it for me?
Yeah.
And he wrote back and he's like, oh yeah, you sent it to me, tell me what you wanted. I said, actually, and I told him the plan, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So I shipped it to him with the directions of the inscription and a shipping label to Dan. So it was going to come from Timothy Zahn to Dan. And I enlisted some of the guys in the group to help me prevent him from paying $400 for this book, right?
Yeah.
Without you giving it away that you're doing this, right?
Yeah.
No, nobody knows what I'm doing.
Well, yeah, he doesn't. So
He
you
doesn't.
wanted it to be a surprise.
Yeah. So I send it to Tim. Tim signs it. He sends me a picture of it. He sealed it up. He ships it to Dan. 3 days later, you get this Facebook post how excited he is that he's got a package from Timothy Zahn and it's this custom autographed. Oh, this is so cool. And then he found a note in there from Timothy saying, you have really great friends. And he's like, who the hell did this? And I was like, hi, Dan. He's like, oh. And we just became really good friends at that point. That ties into my whole collector's mentality, right?
Yeah.
He wanted that book really bad. I didn't need it. I just had it, right?
Right.
That's my biggest weakness. If it's exclusive, I gotta have it.
Yeah.
so like the High Republic books that I have the first edition hardcover regular versions, but then there are 2 bookstores in the UK that every time they release a High Republic book, they release a limited edition from there. So I have 3 copies of every single High Republic book ever released because I have actually some of them I have 4 because I don't know if you've heard of these, but we got Goldsboro Books does exclusives.
Okay.
Painted edges and things like that. Inkstone is another one that does exclusives, and then there's a place called Out of Print, and Out of Print does really fancy ones.
Yeah.
Like leather bound kind of
books.
Yeah.
Smells of mahogany.
Right. The Thrawn trilogies were released by Out of Print in these, sleeved leather bound editions.
Awesome.
They were $150. And you guys, I'm totally going to go back on what I said earlier. You guys are going to think I'm terrible for saying this, but I bought that trilogy, the first Thrawn trilogy. I bought all 3 of them for $150 each, and they were sitting on my shelf. And I was like, you know what? They don't fit with the rest of my collection, so I sold them for $500 each.
Wow. Nothing against that. That's awesome.
But here, I'm talking about collector's mentality and not scalping and everything. But I was like, I sold the books for $350 more than I paid for them each. So, but that's the only time I've ever done that, and I felt really dirty afterwards. So,
I mean, you've earned your moments to have that, right? I mean, you've done a lot for fans if you're selling at retail price or just a little over.
Well, why should we hurt each other, right?
Right.
I mean,
right. And that's, that everyone always talks about the toxicity of like Star Wars fans, but I think at the same time the community is really great, and they all want the benefit of Star Wars, meaning like they want it to grow, they want it to be impactful to people. So
yeah,
you're a tribute to that with all those things, especially that story with Timothy Zahn and his book. Like, that's awesome. I love that story.
And
there's some really cool stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan and I have become really good friends because of that. So we talk all the time now. So it was fun for me to do, and it spawned a friendship that I really appreciate. So.
And you're on a Tim name basis with Timothy, huh? It's not Timothy. Or does he always go by Tim? Is that?
I don't know, but I started calling him Tim in the chat, and he never corrected me. So.
Some call me
cooler. Tim. Love that movie. So I will wrap us up here in a little bit, but you talked about how you're all about the droids and everything. So I kind of have two questions. First of all, is R2D2 the narrator for all of Star Wars? Because there's all that like conspiracy talk that Star Wars is told through the lens of R2.
I think he's the snarky asshole, and the reason he's bleeped out is because everything he says is rude and sarcastic and
So kind of like
inconsiderate.
Chopper. Chopper does the
Yeah,
same thing
yeah,
too.
yeah. But I gotta go with I'm gonna go all the way back to George Lucas's Journal of the Wills, even though we don't
Yeah.
wholly know what the wills are. That it'd be cool if it was through the lens of R2, but I'd say no.
Well, we were gonna find out more about the Wills if he did his sequel trilogy, and didn't he give them those stories too?
Yeah, he
And they
gave them
just
a
kind
treatment, and they ditched it with the EU.
threw it out. Darth Maul was supposed to play a big role, and then what's the female Sith that looks like him?
Oh,
No,
Talon.
Zana?
Talon. Darth Talon, wasn't that?
She was a Twi'lek that was tattooed up like him, yeah.
Like Maul.
Yeah.
It's just a fascinating story I feel like we would have gotten, and learning about the Wills would have been really cool.
Yep.
The other question I was going to ask, so one of the projects that Disney had announced and Kathleen had announced was the Droids movie. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts of a specific droid movie and how, like, I'll just ask you that.
I don't think it would work. I don't think droids add character to characters, right? They are their own characters, but they add character to characters. So I don't think they can be the main character, because they don't converse like people do. You know what I mean? Like even C-3PO, who he's a protocol droid, is designed to talk. He doesn't talk like people do.
Right.
And having a droid movie where they were talking like people do, I think would ruin. It just wouldn't work, I don't think.
To me, the only way it would work is if they did it like a Pixar thing for kids.
Yeah.
Sure.
No?
Yeah. Sure.
Well, I mean, it's like the 1984, 1985, the Droids cartoon series.
Yeah. Yeah.
R2 and 3PO. And I love those cartoons, don't get me wrong, right? But it's a cartoon, which is why it works. If they tried to do that in live action, it wouldn't sell properly. I don't think, because they tried that with maybe I'm misremembering. It was a Clone Wars episode where 3PO and R2 get stranded on a planet with little people.
Yeah.
Tiny little aliens, right?
If I'm recall, yeah.
That's about as close as I would get to something that was just droids.
Well, and they had that arc too. It was like 3 episodes where that little alien creature was with like 5 different droids, and they were lost somewhere and they had to get back or something like that. So
that's when they found Gregor, though, and everybody loves
Gregor. Yeah, they found Gregor. But yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't really. I mean, I say you can't. I'm sure there's a way, but it's just hard to envision a story that would revolve around droids. To me, it was just probably purely merchandise opportunity that they saw, and then we're like, maybe this story actually wouldn't work.
And it works for them, because if you look at like B2 and Chopper, like they've made droids that people like.
Oh yeah,
but I don't think
many times the droids are the fan favorites of the movies or shows. Like K2SO and Rogue One was probably one of the best characters in that.
Yep. And they did do a comic series, one of the more recent series called Dark Droids. That might have been a pilot for what they were trying to do there, was like mercenary droids.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, it would have to be like a group of, because you had like Forlom in The Empire Strikes Back, right? He was a people robot.
Yeah.
I guess it could work, but I don't know.
It'd be tough. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been great, learning about your passion, learning about your collection. Definitely a passionate, dedicated fan, and I'm sure Disney appreciates your your contributions towards it. They same with me here. But yeah, we'll have to have you back sometime and talking more Star Wars, and
Sure.
it's been an absolute blast. And any final thoughts from you first of all? And
No, it was a great experience. I appreciate you guys having me.
yeah, Dustin, how about you? Any final thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, this is pretty laid back, right? So it's just fun, and I want to say I apologize for how kind of hectic this has been for me with the kids and just the timing of it, but and then having maybe some unwanted guests on the podcast for a second here and there, and then of course me having to leave for a second, but I mean, just catching those two stories about, those authors and the interactions is just really cool. I mean, that's actually really unique, something we haven't had on our podcast. And we've had some really cool guests, right? Or prisoners.
Yeah.
We had somebody that was in a saber fighting league that was really cool. We had a guy that, takes really, he's got a really big social following, takes pictures of action figures in like different positions and like makes them really scenic.
Lifelike.
We were going to have people on that were going to do that. They were going to do like a Unreal Engine Old Republic.
Old Republic.
Did you ever hear about that? It was on a lot of the Star Wars groups, like Star Wars Acolyte, which is a group, not the show. But they were going to create a Unreal Engine version of the Old Republic.
Really?
And tell those stories in like, short episode snippets. And we were going to have the guy that voiced Malik on the podcast, but the whole thing just fell through. So
we got to try to get Sam Witwer on.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if you have any connections,
Yeah, we're always looking for more people to come on and tell about their Star Wars story or their Star Wars passion. And
I should try to get the Grand Admiral.
Yeah, I mean, I think again that's what makes the Star Wars community so great. There's so many different passions and skill sets and everything to the community that we were talking about trying to be inclusive and diverse. Like the community is already so diverse and inclusive that the films don't need to press any kind of agenda. We're already diverse. But yeah, again, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Andor's coming
it's funny
soon.
just to point out that much, just to piggyback on that. Probably most of Star Wars fans throughout their life were of the margins of society, right? As far as like, nerds.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Geek.
We were the ones bullied growing up.
Yeah.
Crying out loud. But yeah, Andor's coming up. I'm sure you're going to be watching that. So looking for, and I love how they're going to be releasing it 3 episodes at a time for 4 straight weeks. So it's going to be like full film length of content. I heard someone was talking about that. The strategy behind that is to prevent like Star Wars like channels and YouTubers and everything from being able to review the content. So it allows people to like watch it on their own before like content gets released on it. So interesting strategy if that is the case. And because you're going to try and watch all 3 of them right away, but looking forward to that. That's just around the corner. Again, if you're listening to us right now, hit that subscribe button, like this video, comment, rate, review, all the above. We greatly appreciate it. And just to speak to our social media handles really quick, you can find us on Twitter at DetBlockAA23pod, on Instagram at detention_block_AA_23, and then our Facebook group and YouTube channels, Detention Block AA23, a Star Wars podcast. And you can find us on TikTok at DetBlockAA23. Any social media handles you want to speak to, or you talked about those communities that on Facebook that or maybe that was, you were, never mind, that was the Acolyte you mentioned, Dustin, right?
Yeah, okay. And there's like Old Republic ones and all that stuff. So
okay. But yeah, it's been fun. Looking forward to having you back on sometime and maybe around the Andor, and we'll pick your brain about your thoughts on the show and everything. So cool. Apologize for also the internet connection. It's been a little unstable. It's been an interesting day today. So between kids and internet connections and a new guest. So it's been quite eventful, but love what we got out of it. Love the stories. Yeah. So have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone. And we look forward to talking to you guys next time. And as always, may the force be with you.